Welcome to the Ghostly Gallery podcast, a place where we explore the world of horror and mystery in film, television, books, and in popular culture. Well, greetings, everyone. Welcome to another show. My name is Bruce Markison. As always, I'm joined by co-host and producer Tracy Asteria. Tracy, how are you today?
Doing good, Bruce. How's everything going with you?
Good, and I would be remiss if I did not mention that today is your birthday. Happy 39th, right?
Absolutely. Very kind of you. Thank you.
So it is your birthday today, and we were just talking off air about maybe you might go out with your family later today if you can convince them to get out of bed, right?
Exactly. It was a long gaming night for one of my kids. So yeah, if I can get him to get up, we'll be going out somewhere. If not, maybe I should just take myself out.
So how do you treat birthdays at this point in your life?
I don't really do very much. I try to slide under the radar somewhat.
You don't dread them, do you?
Not dread, but just there's been quite a number of birthdays coming and going.
Yeah. Well, it's worth mentioning, and you got to celebrate it, right?
Yes, absolutely. At this point, that's all I can do. Yes. So
absolutely, you have to. Of course, I've had many more than you, and I've had many more than our guests today as well. That's the transition we use. We'll switch the conversation to our main topic. This week's episode, we have a chance to talk to a young author named Emma MacDonald. We'll be talking to Emma about her new book, which actually is her first book, called Whispers Most Foul. In this book, Emma introduces readers to Rose Fenliff, a quiet misfit who attends Dunhollow Academy of Witchcraft. And this is where she is mocked for being the only student unable to cast a spell. But then, when her classmates start to disappear without explanation, Rose is the only one who can see their ghosts, putting her in an interesting position. Her reluctant partner in unraveling this mystery is her academic rival named Sylvie, recently deceased, I should say. Very talented, captivating character as well. And together, Sylvie and Rose confront the darkness behind these disappearances, and they develop kind of a growing bond, which might be the only thing standing between life and death for them. So that's the main premise of the story. If I've gotten anything wrong, Emma, please correct me, but we do want to welcome you to the Ghostly Gallery. Thank you for joining us. How are you?
Good, and thank you so much for having me, and also happy birthday to you, Tracy.
Yes. So Whispers Most Foul, as I mentioned, this is your first book. When, Emma, did you decide that you would like to be a professional writer, author? Is this relatively recent, or does this go back years for you?
I'd say it probably goes back years. I don't know if there was a set moment that I made the decision. It was one of those things where I've always been writing stories. And at some point that kind of just snowballed into writing a whole book. And then once I had a whole book, which was not this book, it was my very first book, which was terrible, and we don't need to speak about it. But at some point when I had that, I started looking into what the process would be to get published. And that kind of took me on this journey where now, some almost 10 years later, I have my first book out.
Yeah. You say that your first attempt at writing was terrible. It sounds like you're being a little hard on yourself there.
Well, yes and no. I think it is one of the... I didn't take any creative writing classes when I was in college. I don't have any formal schooling in creative writing. So I think writing that first book was very much a learning process for me, in that I had to essentially write terribly to learn how to write better. So looking back on it now at the skill level that I hopefully have now, I can see the cracks in the facade, as it were. But I think, it's still something that I'm very proud of, that I wrote that first book and I made the attempt out of it, but I would not call it a decent book by any skill level metric.
But you learn from it. You're happy with Whispers Most Foul.
I am, yes.
Yeah. How long has this book been in the creation process for you?
Whispers Must Fall. I started the first nuggets of ideas around this book started probably in November of 2022, I think. And I had my first draft of the book written by June of 2023, and then sent it over to my agent. We edited, went on submission, and I got my publishing deal in October of 2023. So round about 2 years in total, little year and a half.
That's pretty fast. I mean, we talk to some writers, especially when they're writing fiction, which I think is so much harder to do than nonfiction. I've tried doing both. To get that all done, to write a book essentially in a year and a half, and then get the book published within a few months, that's amazingly quick.
Yes, it was. It's interesting because so I am traditionally published, and the traditional publishing industry tends to be a very hurry up and wait type of industry. I will say my case was a little bit unusual, especially the amount of time that it took to sell the book, because once it goes over to your agent, it goes on sub or on submission, where they're sending it out to editors, and that can take anywhere from a couple of weeks to a year. Some people can be on sub for longer. I got very lucky in that case and got my first offer, I think after like 10 days. So that's probably not something that would be replicated again in my career. That was just right time, right place kind of situation. In terms of writing the book very quickly, I think I have my ADHD to thank for that a little bit, because for the most part, that leads me to procrastinate a lot. But there is a thing called productive procrastination, where once you get to the end of a deadline, you can suddenly do a lot of work in a very short time frame. And so that definitely helped me out on that shorter timeline.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, given the subject matter, and I discussed a little bit of the storyline, is this a book where you were directly influenced by the Harry Potter series?
Not particularly. I will say I was not much of a fan of the Harry Potter books growing up. I did read them, but my sister was like a really big fan. And I don't know if you all have siblings, but in my sibling relationship with my sister, there were things that my sister liked and things that I liked. And as the younger sister, if I liked something that my sister liked, then I was copying her, and it was a whole big thing. So we weren't like allowed to like the same things, So because she was such a big fan, it was never really in my wheelhouse. So it is kind of funny to me when people make comparisons, which I think is entirely fair, because it's almost impossible to have a book at a magical, school of any sort and not have that comparison be made. But when people make those comparisons, I'm like, it really isn't intentional. I haven't probably touched this book since I was like 15. So yeah, unfortunately, no, I'm not a huge fan. So.
And that's okay. I've actually never read the Harry Potter books myself. I think I might have seen maybe half of one movie, but that was about it. And that was with my kids. But I'm kind of curious. I read your website and a little bit of your biography, and you mentioned that you are an actual witch.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, what does being a witch mean to you? Not just as a storyteller, but as a person just living in the modern world today?
I think being a witch is, in our modern world, a little bit to be on the fringes of society. It is something that is inherently a little bit out there, I guess, outside of the normal. I hate to use the word normal, but outside of, the accepted systems of. So for some people, it's a very religious practice. It isn't for me necessarily, but to be part of that is kind of not against organized religion, but it is generally outside of the larger organized religions that are recognized around the world. For me, it is more about being in tune with the world around me. So I am particularly a green witch and a dream witch. And so that usually manifests as I spend a lot of time out in nature and growing things and making things myself. And I also spend a lot of time dreaming and being in kind of that, I'm a lucid dreamer as well. So I spend a lot of time in that kind of in between stages of sleeping and waking, and kind of exploring all of that.
Oh my gosh, I find it absolutely fascinating. I've got a whole collection of books upstairs in my house of just on practicing witchcraft and stuff like that. So I find it very fascinating. Um, do you have any, just curious, like family stories or superstitions that have been passed down to you, or are you kind of like the first?
You know, it's funny. Growing up, I would have said that I was the first, but I have actually found a lot of, so I don't know if you can see like the background behind me, but a lot of that is actually family heirlooms. I actually have one of these cups here that I've had. It was my grandmother's from years ago, and I didn't realize until recently that there's actually a little pentagram on that. So I think there was a little bit more witchiness in my family than I was maybe aware of. That didn't get passed down to me directly. Because my grandmother died when I was quite young. But just these things that I find out over time that kind of connect me to them, even though they have passed and everything. So that's always kind of interesting.
Oh my gosh. Oh wow. Oh, that's so cool. Oh, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course.
Um, and I just have one more question. How is it that ghosts and supernatural can make storytelling better?
I think that especially in fiction, because everybody loves a good ghost story. I mean, that's, you tell the ghost stories around the campfire. It's just it sets that tone. But I think it does explore something that we as humans want to connect to that is kind of I don't know, beyond beyond the veil, literally, but it is kind of that innate question of the unknown that I think humans are drawn back to time and time again. And ghosts and spirits and everything that kind of gets put into the witchy category or the woo-woo category or whatever you want to call it. I think that that is something that speaks to us as humans, just like across the board. And some people more than others. Obviously, not everybody is really into ghost stories, but I think that when we're talking about fiction, it is a really interesting place to be able to explore that and explore the unknown and what that means and those connections that we have with people even beyond death and how that plays out, in a story is always kind of interesting.
Oh, awesome. Oh, thank you.
Emma, I want to pick up on something that Tracy had asked you about being a witch today in modern day life here in America.
Mm.
Is there still that misperception that people have if you inform them that you're a witch or they find out that you're a witch? Are there still people who have those associations with, Margaret Hamilton from The Wizard of Oz and sometimes the evil witches that we have seen portrayed in horror films? Does that still go on, or have we gotten past that in society?
I think it really depends on who you're talking to. I have had people, when they find out a witch or that I'm a witch, they'll be like, "Oh, are you going to hex me?" And always kind of my response to that is, "Why do you think you deserve to be hexed?" If that's like the first question out of their mouth. But I think there definitely are still a lot of misconceptions, and witchcraft as a whole is a very large umbrella term that I think gets thrown around. But there are many, many practices that kind of fall under that umbrella, and so I can't speak to everybody's experience with that. I can really only speak to my own, and I will say that I do get people, sometimes who have kind of I don't want to say like outdated ideals, but they don't really have a concept of it. So they revert back to like making jokes out of it or things like that. I don't think, I personally haven't run into anybody who is, she's a witch, burn her kind of attitude about it. But yeah, people ask interesting questions sometimes, and other people think it's really, really cool and have been interested in it their whole lives and just never really knew how to get into it, and so they want to have a conversation about that. So I think it really depends on the person.
Yeah. One of the reasons I asked that, here in Cooperstown, we had a famous writer, James Fenimore Cooper, some have called the first great American novelist. And he had a niece named Susan Fenimore Cooper. And she was actually skilled at performing acts of levitation. She could levitate people, objects. She used to put on exhibitions. And at the local church that she belonged to here in Cooperstown, the pastor there kind of sat down with her and said, you really shouldn't do this sort of thing because it goes contrary to what being a religious church-going person is all about. I don't know that he necessarily called her a witch or that anybody used that terminology, But I'm guessing this is 1800s. I'm guessing some people had that belief, and that included the pastor, and he wanted her to stop doing these acts of levitation because maybe he did consider that witchcraft. So that's years and years ago.
Right.
But sometimes beliefs are hard to change.
Yeah, and I think that definitely there's a lot of long-held superstitions that that people still have to this day. And like I said, I haven't personally encountered anybody who wouldn't necessarily have that reaction to me, but that doesn't mean that no witch out there ever does. I'm certain that people have not always been or still are not always so welcoming towards that, because there is a lot of misinformation about witchcraft out there, I think.
All right, let's get back to the book itself. I'm curious, how difficult is it to write a book in this realm of fantasy, witchcraft, elements of horror? You have to create everything from scratch. I look at something like this, it must be hard as heck to do.
I think honestly that's actually my favorite part. I could not for the life of me write a nonfiction book, I think. I have tried writing in other genres before, back before I settled on fantasy and wrote my first book. And I would always get sorry, I just saw the cat. Sorry. But ironically, I was about to say I would always get distracted. My attention would get shifted away from what I was writing until I started writing in fantasy, and that allowed me to engage with what I was writing in a way that no other genre did before. Because, as you said, I not only did I have to create everything, I got to create everything, and that is my favorite part of the writing process, is coming up with all of the ideas and seeing how everything fits together. My least favorite part is actually the drafting of the book and writing everything down. But the ideas stage and the world building and the magic and all of that, bringing that all together is the most fun for me.
For those who are listening on Podbean and not watching the video on YouTube, Emma's referring to the cat, which just appeared, Tracy. And that's interesting because years and years ago, they used to call cats witches' familiars, right?
Yeah, I actually have a little black cat lurking around here somewhere, so she may make a very loud appearance at some point, and if that happens, I apologize.
Now, it's funny you mentioned that. My daughter just got for us a little black cat he's so tiny. He's just a few weeks old. And she actually informed us of this acquisition while we were traveling to Pennsylvania for Monster Bash convention. And it wasn't to say, can I get the cat? It was basically to say, I've got the cat. I hope that's okay. Don't get mad. So, well, it is a black cat too.
There is something colloquially known as the cat distribution system, and it is essentially the idea that cats will just show up in your life and kind of make themselves a part of your home, whether you want them to or not. You don't really get a say in it. They're there now. So that's kind of what that sounds like.
Agreed.
So your book has fantasy, it's got horror, it's also got mystery, which only adds to the fun. Tell us a little bit more about the mystery contained in the book. I mentioned it briefly at the outset, but give us a little more detail without giving away the whole thing.
Yeah, I'll try my best not to give away any spoilers. So the mystery is essentially, as you mentioned, centered around the fact that Rose can see the ghosts of her missing classmates. Two in particular. The first one, a student named Abilene, who went missing prior to their break, and she comes back and Rose is the only one that has been able to see her. And then a little later in the story, her academic rival Sylvie goes missing, and she is once again the only one that can see her ghost. And the mystery is kind of built around that because necromancy in this world is something that is frowned upon. And so the idea of seeing ghosts and anything tied to ghosts and the dead and raising the dead is, as I said, very frowned upon. And so Rose kind of can't admit that she's seeing these ghosts without risking something for herself. And she's also not entirely sure that is what she's seeing. She can't talk to anybody about it. She's not really sure what's going on. So the mystery is really centered on that and how to prove whether the students are actually missing, what has happened to them. Is it all just in her head, or is there actually something very wrong here? And Dunhollow is a place that is built on appearances, and elitism and, all these like rotten to the core, we can't talk about the shadows lurking underneath kind of place. So that does make it very difficult for her to find out the truth of what is going on, because everybody is keeping secrets and nobody wants to tell her the truth. So
You mentioned the term necromancy.
Mhm.
I think we all know what that is, but for some listeners who aren't familiar with the term, explain, please.
Yeah. So necromancy, I think, has been used to describe a lot of different, magical practices. But in this book, the way that I use it is that necromancers are able to raise the dead as kind of thralls in their service, and they have historically been very abusive to the spirits that they raise. They're not generally very friendly to them. So it has to do with the death magic and crossing that line between life and death, and what that means to be able to speak to people on the other side, especially in a world that has all this other magic, why that is kind of more taboo than any other form in this world.
I know Tracy has a couple more questions to ask, but I'm curious about Rose.
Mhm.
Is Rose based on you, or is Rose maybe you completely?
It's funny because people do ask me that, and I think it's a very natural question. I will say Rose and I maybe have some surface level similarities. I share her love of books and all things green and growing, but we have very different characteristics. I think if I was in Rose's place in the story, the majority of the story would not happen the way that it does, because a lot of Rose's whole story, again, as I mentioned, she kind of can't really talk about what's going on, and so that makes it very hard for her to explore this mystery. And I don't think I have the self-preservation that she does, so I would probably just end up, asking somebody the wrong question and very quickly just steamroll right through the plot. So in that way, no, we are not too terribly similar. I think all of the similarities that we have might be, boiled down to, as I said, kind of very surface level.
Oh my gosh. Have any readers reached out to you to share any of their perhaps ghostly experiences or even share with you any magical connections after reading your book?
I haven't had anybody reach out about ghostly connections, or, to tell me their own ghost stories. I have had people reach out about the witchcraft and kind of speaking to me as a witch, not necessarily so much about the magic in the story, because the magic in the story is not necessarily rooted in my own practice or any real practice, because I didn't want to take from any real practice that it has
Right.
meaning and value to somebody and just put it into a fictional story. But I think it has piqued some people's interest in the idea of witchcraft in general. And so I have had people reach out in that regard, but no, nobody's told me their spooky ghost stories, unfortunately, which I love ghost stories. So I would love it if somebody did do that.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm actually I'm a paranormal investigator on the side. So I find like ghost stories fascinating as well. Do you have any ghost experiences?
It's funny. I don't, I've never, seen a ghost or like heard a ghost or anything. The only time, so kind of, I mentioned I was a dream witch. The only time that I see spirits or what could be described as ghosts is actually in my dreams, and I'm able to like talk to them there. But I have been told, every medium that I've ever met has just told me that spirits follow me around. Like that's just the common thing. One of them told me that they like to watch me while I sleep, and I was like, that's interesting. I don't know if I like that.
Oh my
So
gosh.
yeah, that I don't I have, okay, that's not entirely true. I do have like a couple of ghost stories or spooky things that have happened to me throughout my life, but I don't have any like I saw a ghost and we had a conversation kind of story.
Oh my gosh. Oh, interesting. Do you so after a long day of like writing your books and just doing research, um, do you have any magical self-care routines or anything that you do to kind of put an end to the day?
I am very bad about keeping routines in general. I would love to be the type of like person that wakes up and has my morning coffee and then starts writing and then does all of it. It's not nearly so orderly in my life. It is very chaotic. But I do tend to like to take some time before I go to sleep. So a couple of things I do that are a little bit on the witchier side is that if I have, you know, a tea or coffee before bed, because I can drink caffeine right before bed. I know it's very weird. But if I have that, usually I'll have like herbal tea or something. And I make my own tinctures and tonics to put in them. So I'll put a little valerian root tonic in there, and that helps me go to sleep. But I also like to take time to, I guess you could call it meditate before going to sleep. Which weirdly, I cannot think about any like story plot ideas right before going to bed, or I will never fall asleep. I will just keep writing stories in my head and then have to wake up to write things down, and that kind of defeats the purpose. But I do try to take that time to center my mind a little bit before I go to sleep, because I have a hard time meditating in my waking hours. There's just I get distracted too easily. I just can't do that. So yeah, that is my sleep time routine, I guess you could call it.
Nice. I do the same thing. Very relaxing.
Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah, I wind down the day by watching horror movies till 1 a.m.
You know, that's also, I will say I'm a huge night owl, so I'm usually up until like 1 or 2 a.m. I don't watch horror movies before going to bed, because again, that would probably mean that I would never go to sleep, because it would just be playing on repeat in my head. But yeah.
Now, Emma, with this book, is this the first in a series, or is this a standalone effort?
It's the first in a duology. So book 2 will be coming out late October in the US and Canada, I think, and mid-November in the UK later this year.
Oh, really? That quickly?
Yeah, again, very, very fast timeline for these two. I think my publisher has obviously wanted to release it around the Halloween season.
Yeah.
For the spooky vibes, I guess. And I think, so it falls into the category of dark academia, and that was, in publishing terms, that was on trend, I think, when it sold, and so they wanted to get that out while that was still popular and, you know, had the best chance on the market.
And do you have a title for the second book?
Yes, it is called Whispers Most Deadly.
Whispers Most Deadly. All right.
Mm.
So in looking over some of the reviews for your book, I found a really good one over at Goodreads. I don't know if you frequent that site, but a reviewer named D. Hancock said this about the book, and it's positive, but it's also very detailed, and I want to get your reaction to it. So he writes, a gorgeously gothic dark academia, Whispers Most Foul has that perfect balance between giving us a dark plot and then having added romance to lighten the mood. The magic school is really cool, vividly described, and we get enough of the lessons/library for the academic in me to be satisfied. The language used is immersive and atmospheric. This is definitely a book to read in the dark with rain pattering at your window. And again, that's over at Goodreads. So you hear a review like that. I'm sure you're pleased with it, but do you think this person's on the money with what they're saying about me?
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be like the ideal review that I could get because I was absolutely trying to create that feeling of, you know, a fall day, or like right, you know, as the sun is going down on a cool, crisp autumn day with the rain pattering outside. So one of the things in the book, in the world of Dunhollow, it is perpetually raining. That is just one of the weird magical quirks about the school. So the fact that, you know, translated so well over the page, that was something they were able to pick up on is exactly as intended, I guess.
Yeah. Do reviews matter much to you? I've heard from some authors. In fact, I was just listening to an old interview that Peter Benchley did. He, of course, wrote Jaws, which is celebrating its 50th anniversary as a film this summer. And his book got mixed reviews. And he sort of explained that he's gotten to the point where he tries not to get too upset. This is what he said back in 1975 when the movie came out. He tries not to get too upset by it. Because there are always going to be reviewers that have a negative view, no matter what you've done. What's your feeling on reviews? Do they matter? Do you pay attention to them?
I mean, I think they absolutely matter. And I think having reviewing spaces are really important for readers. I tend not to read my own reviews just for my own mental, good or bad. I mean, if somebody tells me about a good one, I'm like, oh, great. If somebody tags me in a good one on social media, I'm always happy to read it. I don't go seeking them out in general, because I feel like that is just, as an author, probably setting yourself up for failure, because there will always be some negative review, and you really have to know your own threshold for what kind of criticism you can handle. So I think it's always a good idea for authors to tread carefully when going into reviewing spaces. But I think I had another point. I'm so sorry. It immediately fled my head. But yes, I think that reviews matter more to readers than I think that they should to authors, because there's always going to be people that really, really loved it, and there's going to be people that really, really hated it, and taste is entirely subjective. I think sometimes in some reviews, if somebody were to make a constructive criticism about the pacing or the craft or something, I'd be like, okay, maybe that's something I can work on in future books. But it's not something that I'm going to take to heart so much where I change everything about how I write, because I think it's almost kind of like somebody who really likes chocolate cake, right, is not going to like every single piece of chocolate cake that they ever eat in their life. Maybe they like German chocolate cake. Maybe they like Black Forest cake. And so they're going to seek out chocolate cake. So in this case, the chocolate cake would be fantasy or witchy fantasy. But that doesn't mean that they're going to like everything that they read. And some things are going to work for them and some things aren't. So I think you kind of have to take, as the author, if you are going to engage with reviews, and follow them closely, you need to take what works for you and what doesn't.
Some of the greatest books ever have received their share of bad criticism, poor reviews. I was just reading online yesterday some people that didn't like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, so go figure that.
Yeah.
The book, again, is Whispers Most Foul. Emma, what's the best way for people to purchase a copy of your book? Is it the website or Amazon or both?
I would say I have a lot of links on my website or through my social media that so whether you in the US, Canada, the UK, like wherever you're buying, I have links for all of those. I always like to promote getting it through your local indie bookstore or your local library as well, because I think it's really important to support libraries and small businesses. So I'm going to choose to promote that over Amazon this time around.
Yeah.
And I think if it doesn't, if they don't hold it in the store, you can always request it
Sure.
or request it at your local library.
And what is your website?
My website is emmamacdonaldauthor.com.
And MacDonald is M-A-C,
Yes.
D-O-N-A-L-D. So EmmaMacDonald.com.
Mhm.
You can learn more about Emma there, get the book there, or as Emma says, always a good advice to consider your local independent bookstores. They're always a great resource as well. Well, Emma, we wish you nothing but great luck with the book, and we hope we can have you on again when book number 2 comes out.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Our guest has been Emma MacDonald, author of Whispers Most Foul. We appreciate Emma's time. We're going to take a short break, and when Tracy and I come back, we'll have some thoughts on this year's Monster Bash. Also, Tracy's going to talk to us about some sad news that came down this week. A very good actor passed away, character actor Michael Madsen. We'll talk about him as well. It's all coming up as we take a short break on the Ghostly Gallery podcast. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Ghostly Gallery podcast as we continue. Again, our thanks to author Emma MacDonald. Best of luck to her with her new book, Whispers Most Foul. Now, Tracy and I are going to talk a little bit about this year's Monster Bash. I had a chance to go to it. This was my first time at Monster Bash in 4 years. I was last there, 2021. This time around, I had another great time. Two of the highlights were the chance to meet actors Butch Patrick and Daniel Roebuck. Butch, of course, played Eddie on the Munsters back in the mid-1960s. And he's been making the rounds on a tour of drive-in theaters. And kind of at the last minute, he called up Ron Adams, the guy who runs Monster Bash, and said, hey, I'm in the area in Pennsylvania. Do you need me to appear at the event? And Ron said, yeah, absolutely. So he was sort of a last-minute addition, but it was good to meet him. Got a signed book from him, talked to him a little bit about himself, and also, of course, Pat Priest. They are the only surviving members of the Munsters. Butch is 71. Pat is in her 80s. and they're the only two that are left from the full-time cast. So that was kind of cool to catch up with Butch Patrick. And then I met for the very first time actor Daniel Roebuck, and we talked with him for a good half an hour. He, of course, was a regular on Matlock. He played the recurring role of Rick Pitino on Nash Bridges, a show I really enjoyed. Used to watch that every Friday night. Daniel also had a recurring role on the show Lost, which I'd actually forgotten about. And he starred in one of the greatest films ever, and that's The Fugitive with Harrison Ford. Great movie. And more recently, he starred as Grandpa Munster in Rob Zombie's remake of The Munsters. Now, Daniel told me that he actually knew the original Grandpa, Al Lewis. Apparently, he met him at the restaurant that Al used to have, and Al used to greet people and talk to them for hours on end, tell them stories. And apparently, years ago, he and Al talked about the possibility of Daniel maybe taking on the role of Grandpa if someone did a remake of The Munsters. And according to what Daniel said, he said Al Lewis gave him his full blessing and encouraged him to take on the part. And that must have been pretty cool. I mean, Al Lewis, to me, was the best part of that show. He was the funniest of the characters. They were all great, but in terms of pure comedy, I thought Al Lewis was really the standout. And he had great chemistry with Fred Gwynne, of course, played Herman. So to get an endorsement from the original Grandpa, I mean, that must have been amazing, Tracy. Could you imagine what Daniel was thinking at that point?
I can't even imagine. That's so awesome that there's a connection like that.
Yeah, really. Daniel, by the way, is a huge fan of horror. And I only discovered this maybe a year ago, year and a half ago. He was telling me about his house. It's filled with all sorts of memorabilia, basically enough to fill a museum. I mean, he's got wax figurines, he's got photographs, vintage board games, toys, everything imaginable. He was a monster kid growing up back in the 60s and 70s, and he has kept a lot of that stuff, collected it. He has a deep appreciation of the genre and its history dating back to the classic films from Universal Studios. So it was really cool to meet Daniel Roebuck. A lot of fun there.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, go right ahead, Tracy.
What was Butch Patrick like? Or yeah. Like
He
what
was
was
quieter.
Hmm.
He was nice, but he's not as outgoing, I think, as Daniel. He did talk to us for a few minutes, and he was very cordial. He was there with his wife.
Mhm.
And he seemed happy to be there and happy to be doing, what he's doing, touring the country. I didn't get a chance to spend as much time with him. Sometimes when you talk to somebody, you get a feel for whether they're really going to open up to you and really get into a conversation. I certainly got that from Daniel.
Mhm.
Didn't get as much with Butch. He was perfectly fine and cordial, but we only talked for maybe 5 or 6 minutes.
Oh
Yeah.
wow. That's such a cool experience though.
Yeah,
Just to,
it is.
have
And
that experience.
when I saw both of them, it was early in the show. The lines had not really formulated at that point. So it was nice. I didn't really have to wait a very long time to get either of their autographs or to converse with either guy. So that was nice.
Nice.
Now, Tracy also saw a number of great presentations, including 2 on the Bela Lugosi film from 1932, Murders in the Rue Morgue. And the presentations were done by people that we know, people that have been guests on this podcast. The first talk was by author Greg Menk. He's been on our show a couple of times. Originally, Greg was supposed to appear in person, but he had a problem with a kidney stone, and he was advised not to travel, but he was able to arrange to do the talk via Zoom. That went off flawlessly. There were no technical problems at all. His talk was still great. And just to give you some ideas of what he did talk about, he went into great detail about the history of the film. Murders in the Rue Morgue really was supposed to be one of 3 horror epics put out by Universal Studios. Of course, Dracula's 1, Frankenstein 2, and Murders in the Rue Morgue was supposed to be 3. And it didn't really work out that way. It's not a film at the same level as those classics. It's directed by a man named Robert Florey, very creative, stylish director. At one point, he was supposed to be the director of Frankenstein, but they ended up pulling that kind of out from under the rug on him and replaced him with James Whale. He very much wanted Murders in the Rue Morgue to be shocking, terrifying. It probably was shocking for the day, but there was a lot of difficulties with the censors. The censors ended up forcing a lot of cuts in the film. And some of the more graphic material, they just simply could not include because of censorship.
Mm.
Um,
What year was the movie?
so it was 1932.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And the budget that Florey was given was a lot less than Dracula and Frankenstein. The budget for Frankenstein was $262,000. For Dracula, it was $355,000. Florey had only $164,000 to work with. So right off the bat, he was dealing with budgetary constraints. The guy who headed up the studio, Carl Laemmle Jr., didn't really believe in the movie, didn't support it all that well. So these were some of the difficulties with the film. He was able to, do the best that he could, but it didn't become the classic. I sat with Daniel Day. Dan, of course, has been a guest on the show. And Frank Dillestrito and his wife, Linda, were also next to us. So we all kind of sat together to watch Greg's talk. And Dan said to me at the very beginning that this was actually his favorite Lugosi performance. He played this crazed Dr. Miracle, diabolical, flamboyant character who basically wants to breed apes with human females. He thought it was Lugosi's best performance ever. The film itself, as he said, not that great. Not a great film, but Lugosi's performance really stood out. They had 3 different actors that played the ape, Eric the Ape, as it was called, all, of course, in costume. And there was also some footage that they used with an actual gorilla that was on set. So that's kind of interesting.
Wow.
So Lugosi was the lead. The co-star was an actress named Sydney Fox. And she apparently was involved in a romantic relationship with Carl Laemmle Jr. at the time. They eventually broke up and her career kind of fizzled out. She ended up dying very young. She was an actress that had kind of a Cupid doll look and wasn't always treated to really good reviews. But Greg Mank thought she did a good job. And I saw the movie too after Greg's talk, and I thought she was very capable. Lugosi was very good.
Mm-hmm.
The film itself, I tend to agree with Dan Day. It was not the great film that it could have been. And then we watched the film after Greg's talk, and then we had Frank Dillestrito come on, and Frank gave his perspective on Murders in the Rue Morgue. He talked about how Bela Lugosi showed a lot of versatility in his performance. He also talked about the written stories. It's all based on an Edgar Allan Poe story, but the written story is very different. There is no ape in the written Edgar Allan Poe, and there is no Mad Doctor. So it's a huge difference from what's in print and what is in film. Frank made some interesting points about how Lugosi on several occasions did films with apes in them, kind of a weird thing. He also talked about how Lugosi made many Mad Doctor appearances during the course of his life. One observance Frank had was there are a lot of crosses that are used in the film, a lot of religious imagery. Sometimes in the background, very subtle at times, but that was a big part of what was presented. I had really only seen Murders in the Rue Morgue, bits and pieces of it here and there. I'd never studied it in depth, so I learned a heck of a lot from both of those guys. It was set in Paris in 1845. Historically, Frank did some research. Blood transfusions, which are a theme of the film, did occur at that time. So there is some historical accuracy, although there was a lot of stuff they stretched the truth. Also was a film that did make reference to evolution. And that was a controversial topic at the time. That was something a lot of films would not dare do, bring up the subject of evolution. But in this film, they were willing to do that. And then one other point I wanted to mention, Frank compared this film to another movie that has Lugosi, and that's Island of Lost Souls. And that also involves breeding of humans with animal-type creatures. This was very controversial material. I mean, there was a lot of censorship as it was. It's kind of amazing that the film was even made to begin with, given the subject matter that they were dealing with. Today's world, nobody would think twice about it. But boy, early 1930s, this must have been very controversial.
Yeah, I can definitely imagine. I mean, it back in those days, I think everything was, very, very tight and very on the straight and narrow. To have something that falls outside of that, it is I can see why the censorship people would have kind of gone to town on some of those films.
Yeah, today it's anything goes, but that was certainly
Mhm.
not the case in the 1930s. And even though that, that code, that Hays Code that existed back then, it really didn't get strictly enforced until a few years after 1932. But with this film, given the subject matter, the censors did pay close attention. So it was almost treated like some of those later films of the 1930s, which were severely censored and were forced into making very serious edits and cuts.
Mhm.
Another really good talk, Tracy, I wanted to mention was an author named Lucy Chase Williams, who presented on Vincent Price.
Wow.
And that was very entertaining. She talked about, she was a young college student. She actually was going to interview him in Buffalo and made arrangements to meet him at a public speaking appearance. She actually met Price kind of accidentally at the hotel and ended up riding to the lecture with Price in the same car. They rode in the back seat. They had a driver who took them to the lecture. And Lucy Chase Williams remembered Vincent as just the most cordial, the most receptive guy. He was a huge star at this point in his life. And yet he didn't put on airs. He was willing to meet a young college student whom, was, not a name at that point. He was somebody that, as Lucy said, very conscientious with his fans. If you were a fan of his, he took time to spend with you. And they, in a way, they kind of became friends. He remembered her. So when they met up on future occasions, sometimes without any advance notice, he knew who it was. He knew who Lucy was. And he kept that relationship going. She, I should say, ended up writing a book about her personal remembrances. It's not really a biography, but it was more about the several meetings that she had with him over time. And she also had an opportunity in writing this book to look through some of Vincent Price's archive. And this was great. She found letters that her own children had sent to Vincent Price that he had kept. He didn't throw them out. He got fan mail. He kept it. To me, that's amazing.
Mhm.
We've done that.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I mean,
Yeah.
any story that I've heard about Vincent Price, it's been magical, quite honestly. Just, such a lovely human. I mean,
Yeah.
Sam Irvin had talked
Oh, yeah.
wonderful about Vincent Price, and to hear like another author speak so highly of him, I just love hearing those kinds of stories. That must have been a great experience, Bruce.
Yeah, it really was. And she got to see him lecture quite a few times. This, I think, was around the 1970s. And he apparently was asked to do a lot of public speaking. And he would make lectures. He would travel around the country in addition to, his pretty heavy film workload. He was still making a lot of films in the 1970s. So he was always on the go, but he was always very adamant about talking to his fans, taking care of their needs, their requests. If he could do it, he would try to fulfill it. She ended up writing a book called The Complete Films of Vincent Price. She had access to his papers in the Library of Congress. I guess that's where she saw the letters from her own kids to Vincent Price. And she also wrote the episode. A&E did a biography of Vincent Price. It's probably out on YouTube. She wrote the entire script for that. So it was very interesting to hear from Lucy Chase Williams on the career of Vincent Price. So those are just a few of the highlights. There were a lot of other great things that happened. We had a great time at the Pittsburgh Marriott. My wife Sue and I went there. We had dinner with the Delastritos one night. Spent a lot of time hanging out with Dan Day, who made the long drive from South Bend, Illinois, or South Bend, Indiana, where he lives,
Mhm.
all the way out, about 7 hours, one fell swoop. He made the trip out. He was a little disappointed when he found out that Greg Mank wasn't there in person, but again, Greg ended up doing it via Zoom, and it was a clear connection. And he's always a great speaker, and he was terrific there. So we all really had a very fun time, and I hope to be able to repeat by going back to Monster Bash next spring of 2026.
Nice.
So that's a recap of Monster Bash. But before we close out the show, Tracy did want to make mention of a great actor that we lost earlier this week. A phenomenal character actor, Michael Madsen, died rather unexpectedly. He was found unresponsive at his home, only 67 years of age. Best known for Reservoir Dogs, also appeared in the Kill Bill movies, appeared in Species 1 and 2. And this was an actor that you really like, Tracy. Tell us your thoughts on Michael Madsen.
Yeah, I was really shocked to hear the news the other day, but Michael Madsen, the gravel voice actor who appeared in over 300 film and TV credits dating back to the early 80s, he did pass away on July the 3rd at the age of 67, which is really quite young. And and Madsen wasn't just an actor. He was a huge energy. He was a presence that just can't be forgotten. And here in the Ghostly Gallery, we remember him not only for the legends he helped create in films like Reservoir Dogs and Kill Bill, but for the shadows he walked through in the world of horror. So, whether he was chasing alien hybrids in Species or slaying vampires in Blood Rain or navigating through the apocalypse in Tooth and Nail, Michael brought grit to every role. Madsen, he played killers, survivors, detectives, drifters. It didn't matter what role he was in. It was a big budget or a B movie. He always showed up with the same intensity and spark. And I didn't know this, Bruce, but Michael was also a writer and he was an award winning poet. He released multiple books
Wow.
of poetry and photography. And I did look at those on Amazon and it's quite a nice little handful of books. So that was rather surprising. But, just to kind of like end this, Michael Madsen's horror work, it flies under the radar. People don't really recognize him for the world of horror,
Hmm.
but he was a frequent and welcome presence in any story that he was in. And just his mere appearance brought unease, danger, and authenticity to the genre. and his contributions reflect the versatility and enduring appeal in the world of horror storytelling. And like you mentioned, he was in Reservoir Dogs, Kill Bill, but his horror roles like Species 1 and 2, Blood Rain, which is a vampire movie, he plays a vampire killer. Tooth and Nail, which is an apocalyptic type film, which I just watched. He was in it. It was a smaller role, but my gosh, it was very memorable. He played a killer in that one, an actual cannibal killer. So that was interesting. He played in The Killing Jar, The Bleeding, and the horror comedy. He had a role in Scary Movie 4 that came out in 2006. So he's had quite an eclectic role in the horror genre.
Yeah. I was not aware of that. And I remember him mostly from the movies where he played either villains or troubled characters, offbeat characters who could be a little bit unpredictable. But based on what you're saying, he played some heroic roles in horror too. I really didn't know that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm probably gonna watch Blood Rain here this evening, and it's been so many years since I've seen it because I want to say maybe it was 2007 or something like that, but just excellent. And something that was kind of brought to my attention just over the last couple of days too, that I didn't realize is Virginia Madsen is his sister.
Mhm.
And she made a really wonderful tribute. It was a commentary that I saw on one of the news channels just after this had happened. And I don't know why I never pieced together that Virginia was his sister, but yeah, definitely.
I had no idea either. I saw that in one of the obituaries.
Hmm.
For some reason, that escaped me. I'm not sure why.
Yeah,
But they obviously got along because she had beautiful things to say about him.
yeah.
Would you say of all his films, he's best known for Reservoir Dogs?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. He's appeared in a couple of Quentin Tarantino projects, and I think those were kind of like his top movies. There was actually a clip from Reservoir Dogs circulating on social media yesterday. It's to the tune of "Stuck in the Middle with You," and
Yeah,
he's doing his little dance with, right, well, he's trying to kill somebody, but,
yeah.
yeah, definitely, I think that's probably his very best role ever. Yeah.
We were talking off air, and I mentioned that he and Tom Sizemore reminded me of each other. And
Mhm.
Tom Sizemore died, I think it was just a year, maybe 2 years ago. Another guy who, well, he died well before his time. He was even younger
Yeah.
than Michael Madsen. But to me, they were kind of very similar appearance, but they played a lot of these offbeat characters.
Yeah, no, definitely, kind of like that gruff and gritty type of, you know, antagonist, but kind of the hero at the same time.
Yeah.
You don't know them until you see them, and then they just give you, like, this performance that knocks it right out of the park.
And over 300 films.
Oh my gosh, yes, and, there's, like, another 17 according to IMDb that are either just in completion mode or pre-production, so, he still has projects that will be released over the coming years.
Well, he was working right till the end, and it's
Mhm.
it's unfortunate we lose him at the young age of 67. But thank you for that very nice remembrance, Tracy. Michael Madsen, great character actor, really one of the better character actors of the 80s, 90s, 2000s, right up to the current day. Well, that's going to wrap things up for this week's show. Tracy, as always, I appreciate you being with us, co host, producing, and helping to keep it all together.
It's been fun as always. Thank you so much, Bruce.
Absolutely. Our thanks also to author Emma MacDonald. We appreciate her joining us right here on the Ghostly Gallery podcast. We also appreciate all of you joining us in this Museum of the Macabre, as we like to call it. We hope to see you next time right here in the Ghostly Gallery.